Sign it or walk out. Evelyn Hart's silver pen struck the signature line, and the glass conference room went still. Malcolm Reed folded the confession once instead of signing it. Beside him, 9-year-old Eli lifted the dented metal lunchbox. Dad, the red paper is still inside. Grant Voss reached across the steel table, but Isaiah's truck key landed between them with a hard metallic crack. Beyond the glass, 41 more drivers closed their fists around theirs. 3 hours earlier, the fluorescent lights above Hartwell Freight's inspection lane buzzed against the gray morning, while diesel fumes and wet asphalt drifted through the half-open garage door. Malcolm stood beside truck 318 with his head tilted, listening. Beneath the engine's idle was another sound, a soft, even hiss that returned every few seconds. He crouched near the rear axle, pressed 2 fingers against the airline, and felt the faint pulse of escaping pressure. Luis, shut it down. Luis Herrera leaned from the cab. Grant says the route is already late. Then it leaves late. Malcolm opened his carbon service log, wrote red hold in block letters, and pressed hard enough for the copy beneath to take every stroke. The clock above the parts cage read 5:31 a.m. Luis climbed down, rubbing both hands over his face. His wife had called twice during the night about their daughter's fever, and the untouched breakfast beside him had gone cold. Malcolm broke his biscuit in half and handed over the larger piece. Call home. I'll handle dispatch. Grant approached in a clean navy coat, his voice controlled and almost friendly. Malcolm, we cannot freeze a contracted load over a noise. It isn't a noise. The rear airline is losing pressure. Grant glanced toward the office windows, where quarterly performance charts glowed on a wall monitor. Mark it amber. Maintenance can inspect it after the first delivery. Malcolm did not raise his voice. A brake warning doesn't change color because the schedule is expensive. For 1 second, Grant's thumb rubbed the edge of his wedding ring. Then he smiled. No one is asking you to compromise safety. I'm asking you to use judgment. Malcolm signed beneath the red hold and tore off the top sheet. Grant took it before the ink had dried. I'll document your concern. At 5:34, he walked toward the key cabinet with the page folded under his arm. Eli sat safely inside the dispatch office, finishing homework before school because Malcolm's sitter had canceled. Through the glass, the boy rolled a toy truck across the dented lunchbox and watched the red light above the gate camera blink. Then it went dark. Dad, he called. The little red I turned off. Malcolm looked up. Wind pushed rain through the garage opening, but every overhead light remained steady. Grant returned carrying the master key and spoke quietly to Luis beside the cab. Malcolm could not hear the words over the compressor, only see Luis glance toward him, then toward the highway. At 5:44, truck 318 rolled through lane 3. 2 minutes later, the camera light came back on. Before the truck reached the outer gate, its warning alarm began to scream. Luis fought the wheel into the gravel runoff as the trailer shuddered behind him, missing a fuel tanker by less than 6 feet. Malcolm was already running when the first tire left the pavement. He reached the cab, called Luis's wife with Luis's shaking phone, and stayed beside him until the paramedics arrived. Only then did security escort Malcolm upstairs, where Evelyn, Grant, and company attorney Dana Pike were waiting with a prepared statement bearing his name. As Dana aligned the pages, Malcolm saw the creation time printed in the lower corner. 5:37 a.m., 7 minutes before truck 318 had even left the yard. 7 minutes before truck 318 had even left the yard. Malcolm read the timestamp again while Dana Pike slid the first page over it with 2 careful fingers. That is a system-generated field. Then show me the system record. We are not here to debate software. The conference room lights reflected off the glass walls, turning everyone outside into pale moving shadows. Malcolm could still smell rain and diesel on his work jacket, while Evelyn Hart's cream suit remained untouched by the morning below. Did you authorize the release? Evelyn asked. I signed a red hold. Your badge released the truck. Malcolm's hands rested flat on the steel table. A thin black line of grease remained beneath one thumbnail, and the small scar across his left eyebrow tightened when he looked toward the page Dana was covering. Grant Voss leaned back with the concerned expression of a man explaining something unfortunate but necessary. Malcolm, no one is questioning your intentions. You are asking me to admit negligence. We are offering you a dignified exit. Dana placed a second document beside the first, its paper thick and bright under the fluorescent light. At the bottom, beneath a paragraph about voluntary responsibility, was a clean, empty signature line waiting for Malcolm's name. Sign this, Dana said, and the company will describe your departure as a mutual separation.
No gross negligence no utaschen.
No dispute over benefits. We are trying to protect your future. By changing my past? By keeping this from becoming worse. Grant glanced through the glass toward the dispatch floor, where two supervisors whispered while looking at Malcolm's stained jacket and worn boots. One of them lowered his voice too late. He is a dispatcher. Why was he making maintenance calls? The other answered, some people forget where their authority ends. Malcolm heard them. So did Evelyn. Neither man looked away when he turned his head. Your son should not be here, Grant said gently. That is another concern we are prepared not to document. Malcolm's eyes moved to Eli, who sat in a chair near the wall with his backpack between his shoes. The boy had stopped rolling his toy truck and was watching the adults with both hands wrapped around the dented lunchbox. Malcolm walked over, knelt, and tightened the loose strap on Eli's backpack. Ms. Patrice is right outside, he said quietly. Stay with her until I come for you. Are you in trouble? I am answering a question. Did you do something bad? The air conditioner hummed above them, too loud in the silence that followed. Malcolm smoothed the boy's collar, then opened the door and handed him to Patrice without asking Eli to defend him or repeat what he had seen. When Malcolm returned, Evelyn was studying the empty chair instead of the papers. Grant noticed. He is under pressure, he said. Single parent, early shift, childcare failure. A tired employee makes one bad judgment, then tries to remember the morning differently. I remember the line losing pressure. You are not a certified mechanic. I did not claim to be. Then why did you override operations? Grant's voice stayed low, almost patient. The silver clock on the wall ticked between them as Malcolm looked at Evelyn rather than Grant. Because a warning does not become harmless when the person hearing it has a lower title. Evelyn's fingers stopped beside the silver pen. It was not belief, only a pause. Dana broke it by turning the prepared timeline toward her. At 5:31, Malcolm Reed entered a service note. At 5:38, his credentials were used to clear truck 318. At 5:44, the vehicle exited the yard. The sequence is consistent. Malcolm read the page from top to bottom. Where is 5:46? Dana's expression did not move. What happened at 5:46? The gate camera came back on. Grant gave a small sigh. The camera lost power during the storm. Malcolm looked through the glass at the dispatch monitors, all of them glowing steadily. The building never lost power. A camera can fail independently. Then the system should show the failure. Dana closed the blue folder halfway. This is not an evidentiary hearing. It became one when you put my name on a confession. Grant's thumb touched his wedding ring once, then stopped. Evelyn noticed that too. Malcolm reached for his employee badge and placed it beside Isaiah's key, still lying on the table from the cold open. Use it, he said. Open the file history.
Dana Espalite smaltind.
Your access is suspended. The printer still recognizes active credentials for archive jobs. That would prove nothing. Malcolm held her gaze. Then there is no reason not to try. Evelyn nodded once. Grant's jaw tightened so slightly that only Malcolm seemed to see it. The printer beside the glass wall woke with a soft mechanical whir, scanned Malcolm's badge, and displayed the confession file on its narrow green screen. Beneath his name was a code Dana had not mentioned. Responsibility. Statement R2. Responsibility statement R2 glowed on the printer's narrow screen. What does R2 mean? Malcolm asked.
A routine revision, Dana replied.
Then where is our one? The printer fan whispered into the silence, while rain threaded down the glass wall behind Evelyn Hart. Grant stepped closer and pressed one finger against the power button, but Evelyn's voice stopped him. Leave it on. It was not trust. It was the first refusal to let someone else close the question for her. Dana gathered the blue folder against her chest. We should reconvene after IT reviews the system. My badge is suspended, Malcolm said. My son is waiting, and Luis is in the hospital. I'm not going anywhere. That will not change the facts.
No.
But it may keep them from changing again. Evelyn looked at him for a moment longer, then ordered Patrice to escort Malcolm and Eli to the driver's break room while Jonah Bell from IT was called upstairs. Grant described the move as a courtesy. Malcolm understood it as removal. Outside the conference room, the air smelled of burnt coffee, wet canvas, and the rubber mats drivers tracked mud across every winter. Eli sat at a corner table with his backpack between his knees. Malcolm checked the time on his old phone, saw the missed call from the apartment office, and turned the screen face down before the boy could read the notice about late rent. Are we going to lose our place? Eli asked. Malcolm crouched and tightened the loose lace on his son's sneaker. Today, we are going to get you to school. That isn't what I asked. I know. Malcolm rested a hand on the boy's shoulder. And I'm not going to lie to you just because the truth is uncomfortable. Across the room, Isaiah stood beside Keisha and Reggie, their route tablets still dark. No one applauded Malcolm. No one called him brave. Isaiah simply pushed a paper cup of water toward him. You covered my route when Renee had surgery. Keisha folded her arms. You changed the rotation so I could make my daughter's winter concert. Reggie looked toward the glass room upstairs. When payroll tried to cut my health coverage, you found the error before I did. Malcolm shook his head. Those were scheduling problems. They were our lives, Keisha said. The room settled around that sentence. Truck engines idled beyond the loading doors, low and heavy, while dispatch alerts chimed unanswered from the wall monitors. Isaiah lifted his key ring. Then we hold every unit. No, Malcolm's answer came quickly. They are trying to say I caused disruption. Do not hand them proof. So we just keep driving? You inspect every truck. You document every warning. You refuse only what is unsafe. And if they fire us? Malcolm looked at the wedding photograph tucked inside Isaiah's clear badge sleeve, then at Keisha's phone, where a child's school picture filled the lock screen. Do not gamble your rent because you are angry for me. Protect your families because the trucks have to be safe. Through the glass above them, Evelyn watched Malcolm return Isaiah's keys instead of collecting them. Grant stood beside her, speaking softly, probably explaining that Malcolm was organizing resistance. But Evelyn could see the route tablets remain on the table and the drivers begin opening inspection forms instead.
Eli tugged Malcolm's sleeve.
Dad, can I have my lunchbox? Malcolm brought the dented metal box from beneath the chair and wiped a streak of garage grit from its lid with his cuff. When he opened it, the toy truck rolled against a folded sheet of pink carbon paper. Malcolm stopped. The lower copy of his service log was still there, the words red hold pressed deep enough to leave grooves in the paper. Beneath it lay a grease-stained maintenance tag he had not noticed before. Luis put that in there, Eli said. When you ran to the truck, he said not to lose it. Malcolm unfolded the tag carefully. 3 words had been written across the bottom in Luis's hurried block letters. Grant took master key. Keisha reached for her phone. We need pictures of that. Malcolm covered the tag with his palm. Not yet. Why? Because a photo can be called edited. This needs a witness, a time, and a clean chain from this table to whoever examines it. Grant entered before anyone had moved. His smile was calm, almost sympathetic, but his eyes went directly to the open lunchbox. That is personal property, he said. Anything inside it is irrelevant to the company review. Malcolm had not shown him the carbon copy. He had not shown him the maintenance tag. Yet Grant was already reaching for the box, and through the glass above them, Evelyn Hart slowly turned away from the printer and began watching his hand. Grant's hand stopped inches above the open lunchbox. "Step away from it," Malcolm said. "That paper belongs to the company. Then the company should preserve it." The driver's break room fell quiet except for the low vibration of idling engines beyond the loading doors. Evelyn Hart stood behind the glass above them, one hand resting against the steel railing, watching Grant reach for evidence he had already called irrelevant. "Mr. Voss," she said through the open door, "do not touch the box." Grant straightened and adjusted his navy cuff. "Of course, I was only preventing unauthorized documents from circulating." "Nothing circulated," Malcolm said. "It stayed in my son's lunchbox." Which raises another question. Dana Pike entered behind Grant with the blue folder pressed against her side. Why was a company record removed from the premises and placed with a child? Malcolm looked toward Eli, who sat beside Patrice with his toy truck held against his chest. The boy's face had tightened, as if he understood that the adults were turning an accident into something he had done wrong. Malcolm closed the lunchbox gently and slid it away from the edge of the table. "Luis put it there while I was helping him." "Can he confirm that?" Dana asked. "When the hospital says he can speak. Until then, it is an unverified document with no established custody." "Then establish it."
Dana izgaze sharpand.
Malcolm did not argue further. He wrote the time on a clean napkin, asked Keisha and Isaiah to sign beneath it as witnesses, then placed the closed lunchbox in the center of the table without moving the papers inside. The gesture was small, almost ordinary, but Evelyn watched him create the record Dana claimed did not exist. Jonah Bell arrived from IT carrying a laptop and a gray evidence sleeve. His tie was crooked, and rain darkened one shoulder of his shirt. "You wanted the printer history?" he asked. "Read-only access," Evelyn said. "No files altered. No devices removed." Grant gave a restrained nod. "That seems excessive for an internal personnel matter." "A truck nearly hit a fuel tanker," Evelyn replied. "It stopped being only personnel." They returned to the conference room, leaving Eli safely with Patrice. Jonah connected his laptop to the printer terminal and opened the archive job list. The green screen still displayed Malcolm's name beside responsibility statement R2. "R2 means revision 2, Jonah said. Dana answered before anyone else could. "It is standard legal formatting." Malcolm looked at her. "Where is revision 1? Probably an incomplete template." "Probably." "Mr. Reed, documents are revised constantly." Rain tapped against the glass in thin, uneven lines. Grant stood near the printer, blocking part of the screen with his shoulder while Jonah searched the archive. Evelyn noticed and shifted one step to the side until she could see everything. "Open the version history," she said. Jonah hesitated. The file was created under legal credentials. Dana placed 2 fingers on the edge of his laptop. "Attorney work product may be protected. The company is preserving evidence," Evelyn said, "not publishing it." Grant exhaled through his nose. "This is becoming a distraction from the central fact." Malcolm's badge released the vehicle. Malcolm did not answer that accusation. He pointed to the file list instead. "What time was R2 created?" Jonah enlarged the metadata. 5:37 a.m. "And R1? The cursor moved down one line. The original version had been created at 5:29, 2 minutes before Malcolm wrote Red Hold and 15 minutes before truck 318 left the yard. No one spoke. Dana recovered first. "Templates are often prepared in advance for possible incidents." "With my name already entered?" Malcolm asked. "Employee fields can populate automatically. Before there is an incident?" Grant stepped forward. "You are treating a file label like a confession of wrongdoing." His tone remained calm, almost reasonable, but his thumb had begun rubbing his wedding ring again. Jonah opened the R1 preview. A loose page slipped from Dana's blue folder and fluttered onto the steel table. She bent too quickly to catch it, but Evelyn's silver pen stopped the paper from sliding off the edge. Across the top, in narrow capital letters, were the words PRE Incident Responsibility Version. Grant's face changed for less than a second. That phrase is internal shorthand, he said. For what? Evelyn asked. For anticipated claims. Malcolm looked from the page to the printer screen. Then preserve the printer, the camera system, the email server, and every version of this document. Dana closed the folder. You are not in a position to issue legal instructions. I am asking a simple question. Malcolm's voice stayed level. If nothing was changed, what exactly are you afraid they will find? Evelyn did not answer him, but she turned to Jonah. Place the systems under litigation hold. Retrieve R1. No deletions. Grant leaned toward Dana and lowered his voice, believing the printer fan would cover the words. Make sure they do not find the first version. Eli was no longer in the room to hear it, and Malcolm gave no sign that he had. He only placed the pink carbon copy beneath the examination lamp Jonah had brought. Under the white light, the signature looked normal at first, until Malcolm tilted the page and saw a thin ridge of black toner crossing over the blue ink of his own name. The black toner crossed over Malcolm's blue ink signature like a narrow bridge. The words were printed after I signed. Grant gave a tired smile. Printer's smear. Malcolm kept the page beneath the white examination lamp. Not backward in time. Jonah Bell pulled his chair closer, and one of its metal legs scraped once across the tile before going still. The air conditioner suddenly sounded louder than anyone in the room. Evelyn Hart lowered her silver pen onto the blue folder without taking her eyes from the carbon copy. Malcolm did not accuse Grant. He did not touch the original sheet again. Instead, he pointed to the clean portion of the signature, then to the dark ridge where the toner sat above it. If the release language was already on the page, my pen would cross over the print. Here, the print crosses over my name. Dana Pike folded her hands. A visual impression is not a forensic conclusion. I agree. Malcolm stepped back from the table. Send it to someone independent. Grant's polite expression tightened around the mouth. There is no reason to escalate an internal mistake into a spectacle. Then the examination should clear it quickly, Evelyn said. Jonah slipped on a pair of nitrile gloves and photographed the paper beneath the lamp from 3 angles. He placed the carbon copy into a clear evidence sleeve, wrote the time across the seal, and asked Malcolm, Keisha, and Isaiah to witness the transfer. Malcolm made sure Eli remained outside with Patrice before signing. He would not let his son's lunchbox become the excuse for dragging a 9-year-old into an adult investigation. Through the glass, Eli saw his father look toward him and lifted the toy truck in one hand. Malcolm gave him a small nod. The fear in the boy's face did not disappear, but his shoulders lowered. We still have the badge release, Grant said. The truck left under Malcolm's credentials. And we still have a 7-minute camera gap, Malcolm replied, which the storm caused. Then the building lost power? A localized circuit failed. What else was on that circuit? Grant looked toward Jonah. That is a facilities question. Malcolm turned to the IT technician. Does the camera server record power interruptions? Usually. And does the break room vending machine require live network authorization for a company card? Jonah's eyes shifted toward him. Yes. Malcolm had spent 12 years watching drivers move through that building before dawn. He knew who bought black coffee, who carried cash, and which machines rejected cards when the network dropped. It was not brilliance. It was the kind of knowledge that came from being present while more important people believed no one was watching. Check the machine beside dispatch, he said. Grant gave a quiet laugh. Now coffee is evidence? Only if someone used a company card while you say the system was down. Evelyn looked at Jonah. Check it. Dana's hand moved toward the laptop, then stopped before touching it. This is becoming dangerously informal. No, Evelyn said. It was informal when we nearly accepted a confession before preserving the data. Jonah opened the transaction server. Green lines filled the screen, each marked with a time, machine number, and authorization code. At 5:43 a.m., during the supposed outage, the dispatch machine had approved 1 black coffee. The cardholder field read D. Pike, legal. Dana's face remained composed, but a pulse moved once in her neck. I arrived early, she said. Grant called me regarding a developing personnel concern. At 5:43? Malcolm asked. Yes. The accident call came after 5:46. Legal prepares for risk before events are fully reported. Grant leaned forward, his tone still measured. Malcolm, do not imply that preparation is wrongdoing. Dana protects this company, including employees like you. Then why was she preparing my confession before Luis lost control of the truck? No one answered. Outside the glass room, a route alert chimed and went unanswered. Evelyn reached for her phone, typed a message, and placed it face down beside the silver pen. Independent document examiner, she said. Preserve the vending records. Preserve every camera log. No one deletes or modifies anything. Evelyn, Dana began. We should handle this privately. We tried private. Evelyn's voice never rose. A man was almost killed. Grant looked toward Malcolm with an expression that still resembled concern. You are making people see conspiracy where there may only be bad procedure. Malcolm met his eyes. Then good procedure will protect you too. Jonah began retrieving the camera authentication history. The progress bar reached 60%, paused, then turned red. He tried again. The same error appeared. The log is not where it should be, he said. Corrupted? Evelyn asked. Jonah shook his head slowly. Moved or deleted? Grant's fingers touched his wedding ring. Any employee with system access could have done that. Jonah looked at the credential requirements on the screen, then turned the laptop toward Evelyn. Not any employee. Removing this log required management level authentication. Management level authentication, Jonah repeated, turning the laptop so Evelyn Hart could see the access requirement herself. Grant Voss adjusted his cuff. Management credentials are shared during emergencies. Then the cabinet log will show who checked out the master badge, Malcolm said. Grant's smile remained polite, but his thumb found his wedding ring again. Jonah opened the access archive. The printer behind them finished a job and fell silent, leaving only rain against the glass and the faint hum of the air conditioner. At 5:42 a.m., Grant's master badge had opened the key cabinet. At 5:45, the same credential had entered the inspection lane override panel. A badge is not a person, Dana Pike said. Someone could have taken it. That is possible, Evelyn replied. She did not look at Malcolm. She looked at Jonah. Preserve the hallway footage. I want the badge seen on a body before anyone draws a conclusion. Grant exhaled slowly, almost with relief. Evelyn was not accepting Malcolm's story. She was refusing to accept Grant's without proof. Malcolm reached for the grease-stained maintenance tag inside the evidence sleeve. Luis wrote that Grant took the master key. Dana's voice sharpened. Luis is medicated and unavailable for questioning. A note without verified authorship proves nothing. Then it waits until he can verify it. Malcolm let the tag remain sealed. Keisha, watching through the glass, lifted her phone and pointed toward the screen as if asking whether she should record. Malcolm shook his head once. No posting, he said through the doorway. Screenshots can be challenged. Let Jonah certify the records. Grant looked at Evelyn. He is directing employees during an active investigation. He is telling them not to distribute company data, Evelyn said. That sounds like preservation. Jonah searched the override database for truck 318. One red warning appeared, then a second line beneath it showing the status changed to amber by manual authorization. Malcolm leaned closer. Search the same credential across the fleet. Grant stepped forward. That database contains proprietary operations information. So did the confession with my name on it, Malcolm said. Evelyn raised one hand before the argument could grow. Run the search. The results loaded slowly, one line at a time. 7 overrides. 12. 26. 42 red maintenance holds had been lowered to amber during the previous 9 months, most within hours of contracted deliveries. The room did not react all at once. Jonah stopped typing. Dana's phone vibrated against the table. Evelyn's reflection in the glass seemed to harden before her face did. Malcolm looked past the numbers to the employee names attached to them. Keisha Morgan, Isaiah Cole, Reggie Barnes, Calvin Brooks, and others he knew by route, family, and the way they took their coffee. These are not all grants, Dana said. Shared credentials create messy records. Then compare the dates to the quarterly reports, Malcolm said. Jonah opened the executive dashboard. A green bar showed maintenance holds reduced by 31%. Beside it was a bonus metric tied to on-time departures and pending investor approval. Grant's voice became firmer. Those reports reflect improved efficiency. Or fewer warnings left standing, Malcolm said. Be careful. I am. Malcolm did not sound angry. That made the warning feel heavier. Jonah opened the archived personnel files linked to the overrides. 9 drivers had signed responsibility waivers after mechanical incidents. 3 had resigned within a month. Calvin Brooks had been terminated after refusing a second waiver. Dana reached for her phone when it vibrated again, but the message preview illuminated before her hand covered it. Delete old waivers? Evelyn saw it. So did Jonah. Dana turned the screen face down. Privileged communication. Preserve the device, Evelyn said. Evelyn. That would be an extraordinary overreaction. A driver nearly died. A confession existed before the crash. 42 safety warnings were altered. And someone is asking whether old waivers should be deleted. Evelyn's voice stayed low. Extraordinary is no longer an argument. Malcolm looked at the 9 names. Anger moved through him like heat beneath a closed door. But he did not ask for Grant's arrest or Dana's. Humiliation. Contact Calvin, he said, and anyone else who signed. Give them independent counsel before you ask them questions. Grant's composure slipped only once. Calvin is a disgruntled former employee. You called Keisha Kiki earlier, Malcolm said. Grant went still. No one in the conference room had used her dispatch nickname. It appeared only in internal route notes attached to the altered holds. Evelyn looked from Grant to the list of 42 names. Then she turned toward the drivers gathered beyond the glass. This investigation will not stay internal, she said. Call the state safety office. Preserve every server, every waiver, every camera record, and every device. Outside, the drivers slowly closed their inspection tablets. Inside, the 9 waivers remained spread across the steel table like names on a memorial, and Malcolm understood that the next conversation could no longer happen behind a locked door. By late afternoon, the glass conference room no longer felt private. A state safety investigator sat at the head of the steel table with a recorder, sealed evidence sleeves, and a yellow legal pad arranged in a straight line. Evelyn Hart stood near the windows instead of taking her usual chair. Beyond the glass, 42 drivers waited in the dispatch area, each holding a truck key but saying nothing. Malcolm entered with rain drying in dark patches across his old work jacket. He looked exhausted, not victorious. Eli remained safely downstairs with Patrice, his dented lunchbox sealed inside a clear evidence container on the table. This is a preliminary fact-finding hearing, the investigator said. No interruptions. No accusations without support. Grant Voss nodded solemnly. Dana Pike opened the blue folder as if cooperation had been her idea. Hartwell Freight welcomes an objective review, she said. Unfortunately, Mr. Reed's understandable fear of termination has caused ordinary administrative records to be interpreted in the worst possible light. The investigator began with the carbon service log. Malcolm's red hold appeared beneath the examination lamp, his blue signature crossed by the later ridge of black toner.
Dana
Acknowledged that the document might have been reprinted, but insisted the alteration could have resulted from routine processing rather than fraud. Next came the printer metadata. R1 had been created at 5:29. R2, bearing Malcolm's name, had been created at 5:37. Templates anticipate risk, Dana said. That is not evidence anyone anticipated this particular crash. For a moment, the explanation worked. The investigator wrote something without looking up. Grant's shoulders loosened. Outside the glass, one driver shifted his weight, and a key tapped softly against a belt buckle. Jonah Bell then displayed the vending machine record showing Dana's company card purchased black coffee at 5:43. During the power outage Grant claimed had disabled the gate camera. Dana did not flinch. I was present because Mr. Voss reported a developing employee dispute. Legal departments prepare before facts become complete. So you were preparing for Malcolm? The investigator said. Not for the accident? Correct. Dana's answer came cleanly enough to restore doubt. If Grant had called about insubordination, an early legal template might appear suspicious without proving conspiracy. Then Grant offered a second explanation. My master badge was kept in an unlocked desk during shift changes. Anyone familiar with operations could have used it. Mr. Reed knew the cabinet, the inspection lane, and the camera system. Several faces beyond the glass turned toward Malcolm. The investigator looked at him. Could you access those areas? I knew where they were. That is not what I asked. Malcolm held the investigator's gaze. Yes, I could have known how. Grant leaned back, careful not to smile. For the first time since morning, the evidence seemed to circle back toward Malcolm. Evelyn remained silent. She had enough authority to remove Grant, but she was waiting for proof that would survive beyond the room. Jonah connected a certified drive and opened the preserved hallway footage. At 5:41, Grant crossed toward the key cabinet with the master badge clipped visibly to his belt. At 5:42, he opened the cabinet. At 5:45, he entered the inspection lane. Grant leaned forward. That proves I performed my job. It does not prove I ordered a dangerous truck onto the road. The investigator paused the video. That is correct. The room breathed again. Malcolm could have pointed at Grant, raised his voice, or demanded judgment. Instead, he slid Calvin Brooks's old waiver toward the center of the table. Calvin sat near the door in a borrowed dress shirt, both hands locked together. Tell them only what you know, Malcolm said. Not what you think will help me. Calvin swallowed. He described a brake warning from 8 months earlier, a waiver placed in front of him, and the threat that his entire crew would lose their routes if he refused. Dana objected that Calvin had signed voluntarily. Calvin looked at his own name on the page. My hand signed it. Fear chose the words. The investigator added the waiver to the record, followed by server logs showing 42 red holds changed to amber and 9 similar responsibility statements issued after mechanical incidents. Dana called the pattern decentralized procedural failure. Grant called it shared access confusion. Then he turned toward the drivers outside. Mr. Reed has encouraged employees to stop work, risking contracts and every family dependent on this company. Malcolm looked through the glass at Isaiah, Keisha, and Reggie. I told them not to follow anger. His voice stayed quiet. I told them not to drive unsafe equipment. Grant shook his head. You want revenge? No. Malcolm rested one hand beside the sealed lunchbox. I did not bring these records here to bury another man. I brought them so no one else can be buried under a record. The investigator's pen stopped. Evelyn finally looked directly at Grant. Did the exterior camera record audio? Grant asked suddenly. No one had mentioned audio. Jonah's eyes narrowed. Why would you ask that? Grant's face remained composed, but his hand closed over his wedding ring. Before he could answer, Jonah's laptop chimed. A message from the hospital appeared on the screen. Luis Herrera was awake, coherent, and had authorized release of the full-voice memo recorded beside truck 318. Jonah placed the authenticated file into the evidence player. First, only the steady hiss of leaking air filled the conference room. Then came the metallic bell from the inspection lane. And just before Jonah pressed play, every driver beyond the glass tightened a hand around a key. Jonah pressed play. The steady hiss of escaping air filled the glass conference room, followed by the metallic inspection bell and Luis Herrera's strained voice. Malcolm marked it red. For 2 seconds, there was only compressor noise. Then Grant Voss answered from somewhere close to the truck. Take it around the block. Reset the light. We cannot hold another unit this quarter. Luis spoke again, quieter. He said the rear line is losing pressure. Grant's reply came clear enough that no one leaned closer. Malcolm does not run this company. The recording continued with the cab door shutting, the engine rising, and the warning alarm beginning before the file ended. Jonah removed his hand from the keyboard. No chair moved. No one whispered beyond the glass. Even the rain seemed to soften against the windows. Grant's fingers opened around his wedding ring, then closed again. Audio can be misleading, Dana Pike said, but her voice had lost its practiced warmth. Without visual confirmation, we cannot establish context. The state investigator looked toward Jonah. Authentication, hospital release, original phone metadata, unchanged file hash, and the inspection bell matches the lane recording at 5:42. Grant swallowed. That still does not prove I deleted anything. I only removed 7 minutes because the system was looping corrupted footage. The words left his mouth before anyone responded. Jonah's eyes lifted from the laptop. Evelyn Hart slowly turned toward Grant. 7 minutes? She asked. Grant's face tightened. Approximately. The missing duration has not been stated in this room. The air conditioner clicked off, and the silence that followed felt larger than the building. Dana's silver pen slipped from her fingers and rolled across the table until it struck the sealed lunchbox. Grant looked toward the glass wall, but 42 drivers were staring back. No one smiled. No one celebrated. Evelyn reached for the responsibility statement. That had waited all morning for Malcolm's signature. She placed it beneath her palm, drew one straight line through the empty signature space, and wrote void in large black letters. Malcolm Reed's suspension is terminated effective immediately, she said. His personnel record will contain no finding of negligence. Every fleet vehicle is now under paid safety hold pending independent inspection. Mr. Voss and Ms. Pike are suspended from all duties and system access while the state investigation proceeds. Dana rose halfway from her chair. You should consult outside counsel before making public statements. I am preserving the company before there is less of it left to preserve. Evelyn looked at the investigator. Take the devices, the server copies, the waiver archive, and the original documents under formal chain of custody. Security entered without touching Grant or Dana. Their access badges were placed into separate evidence envelopes. Grant tried once more to steady his voice. You are shutting down an entire fleet because of a dispatcher's word. Evelyn did not look at Malcolm. She looked at the carbon service log, the altered toner, the camera history, the 42 overrides, and the voice memo still visible on Jonah's screen. I am not acting on his word, she said. I am acting on the evidence you tried to erase. Beyond the glass, Isaiah Cole stepped forward. He opened his hand and placed the key to Unit 204 on the steel table. The sound was small, clean, and final. Keisha followed with Unit 266. Reggie placed down 117. Then another key struck the metal, and another, until the room filled with 42 separate notes of steel against steel. No one shouted. The drivers were not resigning. They were refusing to move equipment that had not been cleared as safe. Malcolm stood with both hands at his sides. He did not watch Grant being escorted away. He looked toward the investigator. How is Luis? Stable. His family is with him. Malcolm released a breath he seemed to have held since the gravel runoff. Patrice appeared at the doorway with Eli beside her. The boy stayed close to her, safe from the center of the room, but when Malcolm looked over, Eli lifted one hand and pressed it against the glass. Malcolm placed his palm against the other side. Did we win? Eli asked softly when Patrice brought him inside. Malcolm glanced at the keys, the voided confession, and the evidence sleeves. The truth got heard. Evelyn opened a cabinet near the back wall and removed a worn brass key marked Fleet Safety Office. She placed it where the confession had been. Lead the rebuild, she said. Full authority to stop unsafe equipment. Malcolm did not reach for the key. Authority spoken in a damaged room disappears when the room changes. Evelyn held his gaze. Then tell me what must be written. Malcolm looked at the 42 keys surrounding the brass one, knowing recognition was not the same as repair. Before I accept anything, he said, I need to know who will be protected when I am not here. The last truck key had barely stopped vibrating against the steel table when the state investigator sealed Dana Pike's phone inside an evidence pouch. Security escorted Dana and Grant Voss through the dispatch floor without handcuffs, shouting, or celebration. The drivers stepped aside and let the system take them. Malcolm did not follow their exit with his eyes. He remained beside Eli, one hand resting gently between the boy's shoulders as Evelyn Hart ordered every vehicle placed on paid safety hold until an independent inspection cleared it. By evening, Luis Herrera's hospital expenses and lost wages had been guaranteed in writing, along with independent legal counsel for his family. Malcolm's suspension vanished from the employee system. The words gross negligence disappeared from his personnel file. Calvin Brooks and the 8 other former drivers received formal notices that their responsibility waivers would be reviewed by outside investigators, not by the people who had written them. Evelyn postponed the investor agreement that had rewarded the company for reducing maintenance holds. 2 board members resigned before midnight. Evelyn stayed. I approved the numbers, she told Malcolm the next morning. I did not know how they were made, but I benefited from not asking. Malcolm stood in the old fleet safety office, while pale sunlight crossed shelves coated with dust. The brass key lay in Evelyn's open palm. Knowing late does not erase what happened, he said. No, and replacing Grant with me will not fix it. Then tell me what will. Malcolm placed a typed policy on the desk. He had spent half the night writing it after Eli fell asleep on the breakroom couch beneath Malcolm's old work jacket. The policy gave drivers and mechanics elected seats on a permanent safety council. Any red hold would require an outside review before being lowered. No employee could be forced to sign a waiver without independent representation. Anyone who stopped unsafe equipment would receive whistleblower protection and full pay during review. The fleet safety director would report directly to the board rather than operations, and every override would automatically create a record no manager could delete alone. Evelyn read each page without interrupting. This limits my authority too, she said. That is the point. She looked at him for a long moment, then signed. Malcolm accepted the brass key only after the policy had been copied, witnessed, and entered into the board record. The new salary would keep Eli's school stable and bring the rent current, but Malcolm declined the executive vehicle waiting outside. He drove home in the same aging sedan, with Eli's dented lunchbox on the floor between them. Are we rich now? Eli asked. Malcolm smiled without taking his eyes from the road. No, are we okay? Malcolm reached across the console and squeezed his son's hand. We are safer than we were. 3 weeks later, the Safety Council met in the same glass conference room where Malcolm had been ordered to sign away his name. Evelyn sat halfway down the table instead of at its head. Isaiah, Keisha, Reggie, a mechanic, a dispatcher, and 2 outside safety representatives occupied the remaining chairs. Luis joined by video from home, his daughter sleeping against his shoulder. Calvin sat near the door, not as a hero and not as a criminal, but as a man being given the chance to tell the truth and accept his part in what fear had helped continue. In a clear case along the wall rested the pink carbon service log, the grease-stained maintenance tag, and Eli's dented lunchbox. The lunchbox no longer looked like evidence of how little Malcolm owned. It looked like the small, ordinary place where the truth had survived because one tired father had kept his papers, fed another man, protected his son, and refused to turn anger into carelessness. Outside the glass, truck 318 waited after a complete independent repair. A mechanic started the engine. The air pressure needle climbed, trembled once, then held steady. Malcolm tilted his head and listened. Around the table, no one spoke. This silence was not fear, shame, or defeat. It was the quiet of people understanding that safety was no longer a favor granted from above. Eli, sitting safely beside Patrice near the doorway, looked up at his father. I thought being brave meant you were not scared. Malcolm placed the brass key beside the 42 signed safety commitments. Being brave means fear does not get to write your name. The engine outside settled into an even rhythm, and in that steady sound, dignity needed no applause. It had simply remained standing long enough for the truth to stand beside it.